Good morning and welcome. Welcome to Live Oak Unitarian Universalist Congregation, our beloved liberal religious community where all are welcome. Our generations join together here to nurture spiritual growth so that we may be inspired to transform the world with love, hope, compassion, and justice. There are 13 empty chairs in the sanctuary today, and those missing are the 13 that went to Oregon for GA, and I think this is a record. Yay on them. Good on them. It's more than 10% of our congregation is represented today. Yes. I'm Kristen Ingalls. I am a member of the worship ministry, and those of us on the worship ministry will help facilitate services this summer when Reverend Tamara is on vacation. Today I have the pleasure of sharing the pulpit with Peter Haslund, who I will introduce in more detail in a moment. But first, let's welcome any newcomers or visitors we have with us today. And we are an accepting group. We accept that if you don't wish to introduce yourself and remain anonymous for a bit, that's fine with us. But if you are a visitor, or if you brought a guest, and if you're comfortable in doing so, we invite you to rise and introduce yourself. Tell us your name and where you're from. So let me start over here.
These are my friends Victoria and Charlie and their daughter Victoria, who was one of my students over at PP and City College.
Wonderful. Welcome. Welcome. Okay, how about here in this little middle part? I saw somebody rise. Morning. We're glad you're here.
I'm Ellen, and this is my friend Kelly, who's visiting me from London.
Right. We're glad you came. And any new visitors over here? Anyone wish to be introduced? And here.
I'd like to introduce some of our dear friends, Jerry and Susie Barnes. We've known them for over 30 years when our daughters who were in second grade introduced us.
Oh, wonderful. Well, thank you and welcome to everyone. We look forward to deepening our connections with you after the service during coffee hour. To learn more about Live Oak activities that build connections, please take a moment to look over the Acorn Bulletin, which is handed out with your order of service, which highlights the many events of the coming week. Later in the service, we make time for sharing of joys and sorrows. These may be spoken at the microphone or written on one of these cards, which you'll find in the hymnals or at the back of the sanctuary. So if you would like to share a written joy or sorrow, please feel free to fill that out now, and it will be collected later. So now let me welcome and introduce our guest speaker, Peter Haslund. I could just about write a sermon on Peter. I have known, not getting out of it that easy, son. I have known, respected, and admired Peter for over 30 years. I consider him a friend. I know, first of all, he's a brilliant man because he had the good sense to join his life with our beloved Minister Emeritus, Bets Winnicky, and they raised their wonderful 4 children together. Peter sent me a bio which was read at his retirement ceremony as he retired as a professor of political science at Santa Barbara City College. It outlined his life, his education, and his many, many accomplishments. But I'm going to put that aside and do a little more personal introduction of Peter about his walking his talk and how it's impacted my lives, and hopefully after this you'll know how it's impacted the lives of everyone in this sanctuary. Peter takes the slogan, "Think globally, act locally," further. He both thinks and acts locally and globally in his professional life, his personal life, and his spiritual life. If you have one of these hymnals wrapped in an embroidered cover, Peter and Betts brought these back from our sister congregation in Transylvania. Now, Peter is so charming, well-adjusted, and normal, I sometimes forget how difficult his early years were. When I was young, I remember having fun playing hide and seek with my cousins in the barn on my Uncle Johnny's farm. Well, Peter too grew up playing hide and seek, but this was in his foster family's barn, and he was hiding from German soldiers, searching for hidden Jews in Denmark. Bless those brave souls for keeping Peter safe. Much has happened since that childhood, bringing us today. And being the spouse of a minister is yet another sermon. But we really got lucky when Peter became wife of the minister. After we found this piece of property and negotiated a price, then came the hard part. How were we going to pay for it? Because Peter has been long involved in the entire UU denomination, both here in the United States and abroad, he had a vast network of UU friends and colleagues. I believe he personally canvassed every UU in the Pacific Southwest District. And when we still needed money, Peter went to Boston, trying to get a loan from the very folks who told us that we were not financially ready to buy this property was no small feat. But somehow or another, this charming man pulled it off. He must have known where a lot of UU bodies were buried, because we got our loan, and here we are. And as soon as the paint dried on our new building, the Fellowship Hall, Peter and his band of builders began planning for the second phase of our home, the building we're in now. Peter worked tirelessly behind the scenes until he and Betts retired from Live Oak, and he handed the reins over to Michael Whitman and his band of builders. Peter did not give me permission to do this kind of a personal introduction, so I hope we're still friends at coffee hour. And I do have copies of his CV in case anyone wants to read all the wonderful things he's done in his impressive life.
A book authored by Barack Obama, The Audacity of Hope, when asked how he would, what he would need to identify political wisdom. He said, "A sense of empathy is the one I find myself appreciating more and more as I get older. It is at the heart of my moral code, and it is how I understand the golden rule. Not simply as a call to sympathy or charity, but as something more demanding. It's a call to stand in somebody else's shoes and see through their eyes." May we all learn how to see from the perspective of others, particularly from those who suffer. Thank you, Kristen, for that wonderful introduction, and we're still friends, but barely. I want to start with a confession. What better place to have a confession? I am a politician. Yeah, five years ago, I filed for election to public office. I raised money. I formed a committee. I had a campaign director. I participated in community debates. I even prepared a concession speech on election night, just in case, and I thought that would be the case, but I was kind of happy not to have to give that talk. I give you that introduction because I have these two phases of my life. One is as a professor of political science, which is something I did for 40 years, and then as a practitioner of the art. So what I'd like to do today is sort of blend these two and talk about how it is that our system appears to have gotten to the point of gridlock, of non-performance or counter-performance, and try to meld these two experiences. It seems to me, and more so at the beginning of this week than at the end of the week, that our political system had come to the point of a sort of terminal gridlock, where, as David Obey of Wisconsin used to say, we don't get nothing done. And that changed magically, as it has changed before in our country's history. It isn't the case that we have this wonderful political system that never falters. It has faltered frequently, and it has been bombastic, and it has been volatile. That is the nature of American history. We came together in 1776, and Thomas Jefferson and John Adams wrote this wonderful Declaration of Independence, and we called it a revolution. Well, it wasn't a revolution. It was a rebellion. That was the rebellion. The revolution, that came in 1789 when we wrote the Constitution in two parts. The first part was what the government could do, and the second part was what the people could do. What were the responsibilities and roles of each? That was revolutionary. But something seems to have happened. We're unable to get work done on badly needed issues such as tax reform or some form of relief for a middle class having to do with the distribution of income. These are all issues that go begging because we don't seem to be able to come to agreement. And thus it has always been. The biggest debate was between Jefferson and Adams, both, well, we claim them both as Unitarians. Adams actually was. And he and Abigail were both Unitarians. Thomas Jefferson claimed that during his lifetime he could not foresee a time when everybody wouldn't be a Unitarian. So much for his predictable prowess. But I used the debate between these two to illustrate a point. They were the best of friends. They wrote the Declaration of Independence together. They both served abroad as ambassadors to France and Britain. Neither one of them was at the Constitutional Convention, and they remained friends through the first period of our combined or integrated history, serving under George Washington. Then when Adams became president and Jefferson became the vice president, they began to separate. They had great enmity. Because Adams's view of his role was that his job was to take care of the people. The people should defer to him. The people did not understand politics or political issues or how to get anything done. And they weren't interested and they weren't educated, and therefore they should kindly just shut up and let him do his job. Jefferson, by contrast, said, I would prefer to empty the public treasury to educate everyone so that they could participate in this republic. This was the debate that continues today, and I'm not sure the jury is in as to whether Adams was right or Jefferson was right. Certainly the volatility of our political system can be measured during the early 1800s when we had one compromise after another trying to save the Union from disintegration. But ultimately it did disintegrate in 1860, only to be put together again by a great civil war. One of the personalities who was most impactful during that period of time was Henry Clay. And listen to his words. All legislation, all government, all society is formed upon the principle of mutual concession, politeness, comity, courtesy. Upon these, everything is based. The success of the Republic, this newfound form of free government, integrating liberty and restraint into this form of governance, was based on the ability to have mutual concession. Contrast that, if you will, with Speaker John Bernard. Boehner has said any number of times, most recently on 60 Minutes, that the whole idea of compromise is alien to him, and he has no patience for it. And as a consequence of this growing polarization in Congress, in 1996, we had the largest number of United States senators actually leave voluntarily. They were fed up. Howell Heflin of Alabama said the bipartisanship that is so crucial to the operation of Congress, especially the Senate, has been abandoned. Jim Exton of Nebraska said, an ever-increasing vicious polarization of the electorate that has all but swept aside former preponderance of reasonable discussion. So it's logical to conclude the system is broken. How do we fix it? Well, maybe it isn't completely broken, as evidenced by a couple of major decisions made by the Supreme Court this past week. Just as we think, I mean, I almost dumped this whole thing because I was so buoyed by the decisions of the Supreme Court. Reason prevailed. How wonderful. And that's how it has been forever. But it is a fact that we have experienced this gridlock, and it's interesting to see just how that is. And I won't spend a whole lot of time on the federal budget, because that's when people really zone out. But let me, if you can envision a pie divided into three components, that's representing $3.8 trillion of your money. It is divided into mandatory spending, discretionary spending, and then the interest on our debt. Take care of the interest on the debt is 6%. The largest component of the national budget is mandatory spending, stuff that was decided last year and the year before, Social Security, Medicare, Medicaid, those kinds of things are already accounted for. That's 65% of the budget. And about 29% is discretionary, but let's look at discretionary. The military is discretionary. The largest chunk of the discretionary budget is the military, and the military gets money from Congress even if they don't want it. Any number of projects have been set aside by the military, and the Congress still allocates resources to fund them. The point of this, the lesson from this particular process, is that increasingly bureaucrats make the decisions because they have the money. And there are no decisions being made in the Congress that are truly innovative. Very, very few, because there is no money to support them. And bureaucrats make decisions on the basis of what regulations have been given to them and how they've interpreted them. So very, very little flexibility if we just look at the budget and come to that conclusion. So what's going on today? Well, what's happened to our politics is obviously polarization. I'm trying to figure out just why that is. One of the variables that did not exist in John Adams or Thomas Jefferson's time is money. Money in politics has is astoundingly, horribly huge. And especially so after the Citizens United decision in 2010, where I think the Supreme Court was entirely wrong. Campaign financing has been a major problem in my world, and more so after that decision, where increasing numbers of dollars come from outside of the district into the country is divided into congressional representative districts. And it used to be that monies raised within the district would support one candidate or the other, and we would have a great victory celebration. Now, most of the money comes from outside of the district to influence the outcome of that particular election. The average cost of a Senate seat today is about $10.3 million. Where's that money coming from? Are we assuming that those who give the money are not expecting something in return? Well, that's why I call this the politics as illusion. Races for the House of Representatives have increased 344% since 1986 because of the increasing tendency for corporations to be identified as people, and people can augment their freedom of speech by giving money to support a candidate. The biggest difference, however, has been the introduction of outside of district funding, $457 million in 2012 of outside of district funding. And what does this money buy? Campaign ads, 30-second ads. Now, 30-second ads don't add much to discourse. 30-second ads have three components. Next time you see one, see if I'm right. First component, things are bad. Oh my God, things are terrible. They're just horrible. And the music that accompanies, if John were playing it, it'd be somber, somber. The colors of the video would be dark blue, browns, this sort of thing. Things are bad. Second part, but there's a remedy. There's a remedy. We can work together to make a difference. We can elect George as our candidate, and we'll solve all our problems. And third, you can make it happen. You can make it happen by voting for George. Three components in every 30-second spot, adding nothing to our understanding of the issue. There is an increasing premium in American politics on decisiveness, which I think is way overrated. And I'm not talking about decisiveness in the sense that, yeah, there are people who simply cannot make a decision. I'm talking about the snap decision that has to be present when you're viewing a candidate for the first time. Money is going to search out those candidates who can make a decision quickly, loudly, forcibly, unambiguously. Well, unfortunately, most of the problems that we face today don't fit into the category of the simplistic. They're complex, and they require time to think about. The American political system doesn't provide for that kind of thinking. And as a consequence, our basic policy questions are often set aside. Issues are presented under, a crisis mentality. We've got to make the decision today, and that is because it's easier. We don't want to think about it. The American public, poll after poll, has shown this to be true. that we're not really interested in politics. We have other priorities. Families first, jobs, friends, associates, having fun times. Down there, well below the floor level, is our interest in political activity. And if I have any plea at all, it is, let's raise that up a little bit, because we have engaged in an experimental system, and the jury is not in. We're barely 200 years old as a democracy, and for most of human times, we've not been a democracy. We've been something else: monarchies, totalitarian forms of government. This is all new, relatively new, and the term participatory democracy means what it says, that we really have to become much more engaged. And there are various, there are things in contemporary politics that make us leery of actually standing for election. I can tell you from personal experience that in my first and second year of holding office, there are any number of times when I thought, what did I do? And how do I get out of Dodge? Because of the advent of personal attacks and anonymous attacks, and it's messy. And you have to develop a thicker skin. I think I have developed somewhat a thicker skin, but it still hurts when somebody takes a personal shot at you because they disagree with your policy statement. Well, there are many other variables, but I'm running out of time, and I don't want to do that. I want to conclude with a focus on searching for a quality of candidate that will embody basic values that we hold near and dear. Our political system is not broken, but to a very large extent, it's owned and operated by a very special interest. And it is an illusion that one person, one vote actually works in this country. There are other illusions, several appeal to me, that we can leave the business of government to those who know better. And no, illusion. That issues are much too complicated for us to understand. Another illusion. That someone else will surely make the right choice on election day. During my time at City College, people would always ask me, how are you going to vote? And I'd tell them, and therefore I would be doubling my vote power. And one year I even published a little list of my positions on all the issues. And anybody dumb enough to ask me, I'd give it. Another illusion is that money doesn't influence the outcome of an election. Well, nonsense. Money buys access. If I go to my senator's door and pound on the door and I've given that senator $1 million, guess what? I get in, and you don't. That wisdom is more likely to come from someone with a loud voice. Well, that is the height of an illusion. That a strong candidate will be a strong office holder. The two are separate. Sometimes stronger candidates, Ronald Reagan was a terrific candidate. Okay. Another illusion is that we're helpless, or as the Ninja Turtles used to say, we're toast. Well, we're not toast. The final illusion is that we are helpless. James Luther Adams, a well-known Unitarian Universalist theologian and teacher at Harvard University, said, don't lose heart, organize. And that's the key. If you organize, and we could do that here. We could organize and have those discussions that prepare us to vote. And I guarantee you we'd get people's attention if we invited people to come and talk to us about their positions. And we made it clear to them that we were not in their pocket, regardless of their ideological origins. We were not there. We would have to work through a set of our own principles and make sure that the world knew about them. We come to a point where we tend to blame our political system and its shortcomings on almost anything. But I'm reminded of the Shakespearean promise of trying to convince Cassius is convincing Brutus that it was misguided, and he's trying to blame the stars and the world for the misfortune of the Roman Empire. And Cassius says, "The fault, dear Brutus, is not in our stars, but in ourselves, that we are underlings." Well, maybe we find the strength, the courage, and the patience to learn how we may speak truth to power, how we may avoid the pitfalls of believing that we are the underlings.
Thank you, John. Peter, thank you for a very thought-provoking sermon today. And I'd also like to break with tradition yet again. It is my house, I guess, and thank our AV team, Marty, Linda, and Eric, who at a moment's notice put things together when we worship associates don't quite get it right. We are going to keep trying. And also for our wonderful musicians who just came in today and decided to join John without any practice or anything. We are too cool. Okay. Every week, we lift up the spiritual value of generosity by taking an offering to support our congregation, our programs, and our work in the community.
The benediction today is taken from Edmund Burke, a British philosopher who was simply astounded by what he was seeing in 1790. This is a man who had only experienced government as a monarchy. And he said, "To make a government requires no great prudence. Settle the seat of power, teach obedience, and the work is done. To give freedom is still more easy. It is not necessary to guide. Simply let go the rein. But to form a free government, that is to temper together these opposite elements of liberty and restraint into one consistent work, requires much thought, deep reflection, a sagacious and combining mind. May we be up to the challenge.